In this video, I'm going to turn my database that I've made, which was the address book, into a relational database. So what I'm going to do is take the address book table that I had, I'm going to rename it and call it customer, something like that. And I'm going to create two more tables. Now the premise of what I'm going to try and create is basically a really simple sales database that will have three tables connected to each other to show how a simple relational database could work. To give a brief introduction or overview of what I'm going to try and make for you, here we go. So what we have is a customer table, which is what we made as the address book. So it's still got the same thing: customer ID, title, first name, last name, address book, etc. Remember, this customer ID field is my primary key. Now I'm going to create two more tables: a product table, which will have simple information, a product ID, name, description, and product cost. And I'm going to have a sales table, which will have a sale ID, date of sale, and you'll notice that I've only got customer ID and product ID. Things that would otherwise go into the sales table I will add later on, but this is giving me enough information so that I can show you how these tables relate to each other, hence a relational database. So what I'll try and do in the database, I'll do as an example here. What I want to do, what I want to do is to connect my customer table to my sales table. And in fact, what I'll do is I'll connect my customer ID to my customer ID. The limitation I've got with the Google document is that it won't do exactly as I'm looking for. And again, I want to link my, my product table to my sales table. The way it will work is, again, product ID will link to product ID. And when you see the database made, it will be a more advanced version of that, because you'll see customer ID link to customer ID, product ID link to product ID. So the aim of the game is to create something, a database that looks like this. It has these three tables and the link between them set up. So I've got my database open. You'll see I've renamed it to Sharma Industries. I'm going to close my switchboard for the moment, and I'm going to pause the video because you don't need to see me creating these tables. When I come back, you'll see a bunch of new tables here, and I'll show you the next step, which is linking tables together. So I'm about to rename this address book table to customer and add two more tables, one for products and one for sales. Okay, so I've made the tables almost, and just before I save this sales table, so you can see I've got the product table sitting in there. I've made the sales table, but I want to show a couple of quick add-ins here. So in my diagram that I had, we had the sales table, sales ID, date of sale, customer ID, and product ID. I want to show you something in the database when I create them. So date of sale, you'll see I've changed the data type to be date and time, formatted to be a general date. So when we look at that, date, day, date, time, year, but also got time as well. So general date is good. Now I'm going to be lazy, and I'm going to have the database do this for me. So the way I do that is by putting in a default value equals now open close bracket. And when I press enter on this, watch how the N in now becomes uppercase. That means that it will automatically stamp the date and time onto that field without me having to do anything, which is great. So that just makes my life a bit easier. Now my customer ID field, importantly, my customer ID is going to link to my customer table here. And because I have the ID in my table field set to auto number, I'll change it to customer ID just so we see. Set to auto number. Importantly, you'll see my field size here or field type is a long integer. That's really important coming up right now. When I go to my customer ID field here, they're going to link to each other. They're going to talk to each other. It needs to be a large number field. A large number is the same as a long integer. It's really important that they match. Same also with my product ID. It needs to be a large number. Why don't I make it an auto number field? Well, good question. Why don't I make it an auto number? That's the same as the other one. It will throw at me an error when I try to save this that I've got two auto numbers. It won't like me very much. So change it to a large number and change the format to, no, just a general number, that's fine. A big number. Any other options there? Nope, large number it is. So now I can save this. So I've set my date and time field to be equals now, which stamps for me a large number, which is the same, will match the ID field from the customer table. A large number which will take the product ID from the product table. And so now I save my sales table. So this will be called TBL sales. Okay. There is no primary key defined. No, I don't want to do that. No, I don't want to keep on saving. I need to set this as a primary key. That's all I had to do. So make sure you set your sales ID as a primary key field. And I've actually chosen to cancel all of that. So it does set as a primary key field so that when I go to save now, it'll say sales, yes. This data type is not compatible with the earlier versions of Sharma Industries. Yes, I do. Hopefully that will work for me. All right, close that. Now let's just see what happens next. So I've got my customer table, which has got stuff in it already. Not that I'm going to use that ever again. Products and sales table will be the same, although at the moment I do know they are empty because I just created them. So there's my products, and you'll see my cost field comes in at 0 because that's what the field type comes as a currency. And my sales table, you'll see my date of sale is sitting there. It's been hashed out because the table's not big enough to display it properly. But I don't want any of them open for what I'm about to do. Come into database tools, and we'll see I've got now my relationships table, which is great. Here are the tables that I have in my database, my 4 different tables. I'm going to leave switchboard items out because it really doesn't need to be there because it's not part of this relationship. And I can put these in any order I like. I'm just going to separate them out a little bit so we can see what my sales look like. Now, this is now therefore going to show how I relate my tables to each other. All I do is drag the primary key to the foreign key. It's really that simple. Check the first 2 boxes. So enforced referential integrity means that customer ID must be the same in both fields for the data to flow through. And cascade update, if I change a customer ID in this field, it will flow through and change the ID in this field. So if my ID goes from number 1 to number 77, it will flow fill that through that link. And you also notice here, my one-to-many relationship. Now I can do a cascade delete. It won't change anything except this is a sales database. You never delete sales. Relationship must be the same fields of the same data type, which I swear I've done. So let me pause and go back and find out what's going on there, and I'll come back with the answer. Okay, I found my mistake. In my sales table, I set my customer ID and product ID, my foreign keys, to be large numbers. That's the mistake. It should be just a number field. And notice down here, long integer. When I look at my auto number field up here, it's a long integer. That's how they then become compatible with each other. So once again, long integer. So when I save my sales table, if we look at the product ID, auto number, long integer. That's perfect. Look at my customer table, customer ID, auto number, long integer. That's perfect. So now when I go back to my database tools and my relationship table, they're already set up. Once again, drag primary to foreign key, check the first 2 boxes. So again, enforce referential integrity, so they've got a match, and cascade update, if one changes, the other changes with it, and create. And you'll see my link is made. My primary key, the 1, to my foreign key, the many. Do the same with the product ID. Once again, check the first 2 boxes, enforce referential, update, cascade, and 1 to many. Perfect. I have now created a relational database. And these links, while they do look cute on paper, actually work inside the database. They say, One customer can make many sales or can have many sales. One product can be sold many times. Think about it. If you're going to the supermarket and buying a carton of milk, you don't buy one carton of milk, or one carton of milk doesn't get sold and that's the end of it. One carton of milk, or that product, has hundreds of items there that can be sold, each one, so hundreds of times. So one product can be sold many times because I have hundreds of cartons of milk on my shelf. Now, need to save that. So there's my database created. And that's really how easy it is to create a relational database. So I'll do a quick summary again because it's probably good that I do. And then we'll finish this tutorial. So my customer ID is an auto number, long integer. My product ID is an auto number, long integer. My sales ID is an auto number once again and long integer, but more importantly, the foreign keys, the customer ID is a number and long integer. Product ID is a number and long integer. That means that they will all link up and match to each other when I go to open my relationship table, my relationships tool. Notice that before I open the relationship tools, that I closed the tables. I only had one thing open at a time so that I could make these links work properly. If you don't do it, that's fine. You're going to get errors. And the errors tend to get fairly narky at you. So again, we have the customer ID in tables. Sorry, the customer ID in the customer table to the customer ID in the sales table. The primary to the foreign key. Primary to foreign key. Enforce integrity, cascade update, done. Product ID to product ID, primary to foreign key. And we have made our relational database. Next video is going to start to see what we can do with that.